Questioning of our witness. Will the clerk please put 5 minutes on the clock for each member? Chairman Bernanke, I'm going to lead off with a question about the LIBOR scandal. Last week, you released documents showing that the Fed provided early warnings on manipulation in the LIBOR market. Then New York Fed President Timothy Geithner raised concerns with President Bush's presidential working group and offered for firm recommendations to the British authorities. Can you tell the American people what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it? What can we do to restore confidence in the system?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, LIBOR is a critical benchmark for many financial contracts. So the actions of traders and banks that have been disclosed are not only very troubling in themselves, but they have the effect of undermining public confidence in financial markets. Regarding the Federal Reserve's role, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York takes the lead in gathering market intelligence for the Federal Reserve System. It was in the process of gathering market intelligence when it received information about LIBOR submissions, notably a phone call on April 11, 2008, in which a trader in Barclays, New York, told an employee of the Federal Reserve that he thought that Barclays was underreporting its rate. About that same time, stories began to appear in the media as well. There was an April 16th story in the Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times also had a number of stories. I'd like to make two preliminary points before talking about the Federal Reserve's response to that information. First, the information the Fed received was about the banks possibly submitting low rates in order to avoid appearing weak during the period of the crisis. The transcripts of the phone calls that were released have no reference to the manipulation of rates for profit by derivatives traders as alleged by the recent decision. The second point I'd like to make is that this issue was complicated during the crisis by the fact that there were very few transactions occurring other than overnight. And so banks were asked to report what they would pay if they were borrowing at a certain term. It may have been in many cases that transactions were not taking place at that term. We'll get more information on that as the investigations continue. But it's clear that beyond these disclosures that the LIBOR system is structurally flawed, and part of the response was to address those flaws. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, after receiving this information from its market inquiries, responded very quickly. It set up an internal working group to address the issue. Importantly, it informed all the relevant authorities in both the UK and the United States. Notably, on May 1st, then President Geithner briefed the President's working group, which consisted of the Treasury, the Fed, the CFTC, and the SEC, among other participants. The New York Fed briefed the Treasury separately on May 6th. The PWG meeting was followed up with interagency staff briefings to provide more information to the staffs of the various agencies. And the New York Fed also communicated with the FSA and the Bank of England in the United Kingdom. So there was active effort to report to all the relevant policymakers and enforcement agencies the information that had been received. The second step that the Federal Reserve Bank of New York took was to develop recommendations to address the structural problems with LIBOR that I mentioned before. The New York Fed released a memorandum, a list of suggested changes that they submitted to the Bank of England on June 1st and following earlier discussions with the Bank of England. There were also communications with the British Bankers Association, which is the private group that constructs the LIBOR prior to June 1st. So the Federal Reserve Bank of New York took the lead here. They've released a good bit of information. They're looking for additional information, and they will certainly release it if they find it. On the board side, we were in supporting mode. We provided analytic support, notably about the issues related to the construction of LIBOR. Our staff were in contact with the CFTC in April and May to provide analytical support, and Governor Krosner on the board at that time was in contact with the British authorities and the BBA during May and June. I think it's important to note that following the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's disclosures to the appropriate authorities, that there was rapid follow-up. The CFTC was making inquiries as early as April 2008. It sent requests for information to U.S. banks in the fall of 2008. The SEC initiated an inquiry in 2009 and the DOJ in 2010. Currently, the European Commission and a range of other foreign regulators, including British regulators, of course, are also investigating. And, of course, we know about the June 27th settlement with Barclays. So there was a substantial response by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, both in terms of informing all the appropriate authorities. That information led to investigations. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York also contributed substantially to thinking about how to better structure the LIBOR panel and the LIBOR information collection to avoid some of the weaknesses in the system that became evident during the crisis.